Hello everyone, my name is Mabel Crowley, and I'm 82 years old. I live alone now, in the same weathered white farmhouse I moved into the day I married William Crowley in 1961. Back then the wooden floors creaked with joy, and every room had a story to tell. Now, the silence screams. There was a time this house smelled like cinnamon on Sundays and echoed with laughter, toy cars and lullabies. I raised 3 children here: Noah, Angela, and Peter. I fed them, clothed them, worked 2 jobs to keep them in school. I stitched their Halloween costumes by candlelight. I held them through fevers and heartbreaks. I made their dreams my mission. And yet, on my 82nd birthday last week, only one person called, and it wasn't family. It was the mailman, asking if I was okay because the mailbox was overflowing. I hadn't realized how quiet my world had become until I found myself talking to the dog next door more than anyone else. My son Noah is a lawyer in Chicago. Angela runs a spa in Tampa. Peter, the youngest, moved to Oregon with his wife and twin girls. I haven't met the twins. Not once. At first I made excuses for them. They're busy. They have their lives. They'll come around. But as the years slipped by, the reality grew stark. The phone calls dwindled into duty-bound holiday greetings. The visits became pit stops on their way to better things. And I became something between a ghost and a burden. I sat alone in the house that once rang with laughter, its walls now echoing with silence. I had given them everything, my love, my time, my youth, and somehow ended up with nothing. That morning, as I poured myself a lonely cup of tea, my fingers trembling with age, I looked out the window at the wilting rose bushes I once pruned with care. My reflection in the glass looked back with hollow eyes. I whispered out loud, "Is this it? Is this how it ends?" Then the phone rang. It wasn't a birthday wish. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even my children. But what I heard on the other end made me push the teacup aside, grab my coat, and step out into the biting cold. Because that one phone call was the beginning of everything changing. The voice on the other end of the phone was soft but steady. "Mrs. Crowley? This is Evelyn Blake. I'm the activities director at Golden Pines Retirement Center. We've been trying to reach you about your old friend, Dorothy Mayfield." My heart skipped. "Dot?" I whispered. "What happened?" "She's in our care now," Evelyn said gently. "She's asked about you often. She doesn't have family visiting, and well, we thought you might want to see her." Dorothy and I hadn't spoken in over 15 years. Life had scattered us, children, work, obligations, but before that, we were inseparable. We raised our babies together, shared recipes, cried on each other's porches. She was my only real friend. I thanked Evelyn, hung up, and sat frozen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, stay wrapped in the comfort of my silence. But something deep stirred in me, something older than the hurt. By noon, I was dressed in my warm coat and boots. I hadn't driven farther than the grocery store in years. But I got in my car and set off across town, the tires crunching over old salted roads. Golden Pines was neat and quiet, nestled behind a line of bare winter trees. Inside, the halls smelled of lavender and lemon polish. A nurse pointed me toward Dorothy's room. When I walked in, she was sitting by the window, her white hair braided back like it used to be, her hands folded on her lap. She looked smaller, but when she turned and saw me, her face lit up. "Mabel," she breathed. I smiled through a sting of tears. "Dot." We hugged like no time had passed. She didn't ask why I hadn't called. She didn't scold me. She just held my hand, and we sat in the sunlight like 2 women who remembered what it meant to be seen. As we talked, I told her everything. I told her how I gave up nursing school to care for my children, how I'd worked night shifts cleaning offices just to buy their textbooks, how William died 10 years ago and no one came to the funeral but the pastor and 2 neighbors, how birthdays came and went with silence, how holidays felt like punishment. Dorothy listened, really listened. And when I finally broke down, she didn't say "they'll come around," or "they're just busy." She said, "You didn't deserve this. And you're not done yet." That night I went home changed. I stood in my kitchen and looked around at the family portraits lining the wall. Smiling faces frozen in time. Me beaming behind them, invisible. I stared at those photos until something inside me snapped. Not in anger but in clarity. Maybe I couldn't change the past, but I could stop living like I didn't matter. That night, I pulled out my old sewing machine. It was dusty, squeaky, and slow, but it still worked. So did I. And that was the moment I decided I was going to start living again. The next morning, I woke with purpose, something I hadn't felt in years. The weight that usually greeted me at dawn didn't arrive. Instead, I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains wide, and sat before the old oak table where my sewing machine waited. It hadn't seen daylight in over a decade. I remember the last thing I stitched, a Halloween costume for my grandson Nico. He'd wanted to be a pirate, and I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. making him the perfect little coat, hand-sewn gold buttons and all. He'd smiled so big when I gave it to him. And then his mother, my daughter Leanne, tossed it in a donation bin 2 weeks later. "It's just a costume, Mom," she'd said, scrolling through her phone. He outgrew it. I never touched the machine again. Until now. I ran my hand over its metal frame. Faded paint. A cracked knob. A few rusted pins still stuck in the cushion like memories waiting to be pulled free. I took a deep breath and opened the drawer beneath it. Spools of thread every color. Needles, some bent, some sharp. Patterns I'd drawn by hand. Things I'd forgotten I could do. I chose a soft blue cotton from my storage bin and began cutting. The rhythm returned like an old song. I remembered the feel of fabric between my fingers, the hum of the machine, the patience of piecing something broken into something beautiful. I lost track of time. At one point a memory struck. Christmas morning when Leanne was 6. I had made her a yellow dress with lace trim and a matching bonnet. She'd run to me and said, "You made me feel like a princess, Mama." That little girl felt like a dream now. But dreams can be reborn. When I finished, I held up the apron I just made. Simple, clean, with hand-stitched tulips along the bottom. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Then something wild entered my mind. What if I sold it? I hadn't earned my own money in over 20 years. William's pension barely covered groceries. But maybe, just maybe. I took out my dusty old laptop. The thing creaked like my knees, but it still booted up. I created a new Etsy account. I called the shop Mabel's Threaded Hope. I uploaded a photo of the apron on a mannequin I'd once used for fittings. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Then I waited. And waited. 3 days passed. No orders. Then on the 4th day my inbox chimed. A woman named Cheryl from Vermont ordered the apron. She wrote, "This reminds me of what my grandma used to wear. Thank you for bringing me back to her." I stared at those words for a long time. Then I cried. Not the kind of cry that comes from sadness, but from feeling seen again. That night, I sat by the sewing machine, tracing the edge of my next fabric. For once, the silence in my house didn't hurt. It was peaceful. Sacred. I was beginning to stitch myself back together. But deep down I knew one thing. The family that once leaned on me might not like the woman I was becoming. And I would soon learn. They were about to test me again. A week after I mailed that first apron, I had sold 7 more. Each one stitched with quiet defiance, each thread a declaration. I still matter. I didn't need much, just enough to feel useful. Enough to fill my mornings with purpose and my nights with pride. Then the phone rang. It was Leanne. Her voice came through like it always did, sharp, hurried, half-hearted. "Mom, are you okay?" I blinked.
"I'm fine, sweetheart."
"Why do you ask?" "Oh," she paused. "It's just, Nico told me you were selling aprons online." I smiled. "Yes. I've started sewing again." Silence. Then came the laugh. Not the joyful kind. The kind that stings. "You're almost 80, Mom. Don't you think it's a little late for side hustles?" I sat down. The old couch sagged beneath me, the same way my chest suddenly did. "It's not a hustle," I said softly. "It's something that brings me peace." Leanne scoffed. "You don't need peace, you need rest. You should be winding down, not trying to relive your glory days." That hurt. More than I cared to admit. But I didn't say that. Instead I said, "Well, it helps me feel alive." She muttered something I couldn't catch, then added, "Look, anyway, I need a favor. Can Nico stay with you for a couple weeks?" I hesitated. Not because I didn't want him. I missed my grandson terribly. But I could hear it in her voice. It wasn't a request. It was a dumping. "Of course," I said. "When?" "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow." She was already halfway done packing, I bet. The next day, Nico arrived, headphones on, eyes glued to his phone, no hello. Just a shrug and a grunt. He was 14 now. Taller than I remembered. But thinner too. Like he hadn't eaten well or slept enough. I tried to hug him. He let me, arms stiff at his sides. We spent the first 2 days in silence. I made his favorite grilled cheese and tomato soup. He didn't touch it. Then on the third night I found him in the sewing room. He was holding one of the aprons. "You really made this?" he asked, almost surprised. I nodded. "I've made many." He set it down and left without a word. But the next day, I found him at the table sketching something. "A hoodie. Think you could teach me?" he asked without looking up. My heart jumped. We spent the next week like that. Quiet mornings stitching. Afternoons cutting fabric. Nights watching reruns of The Golden Girls while we talked about music, girls' life. He smiled more. Until Leanne came back. And with her, the storm. She stepped into my home like she owned it. He's been staying up past midnight? Watching old lady shows? Sewing? "Mom, what have you done to him?" I stood, my voice firmer than I'd heard it in years. "I've listened. I've fed him. I've given him more than just a roof. I've given him peace." Her eyes flared. "Well, don't get used to it. He has a life to return to. He's not meant to be your little sewing apprentice." Nico, standing nearby, looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't. He left with her that afternoon, and I was alone again, but not broken, because that night, I found a note under my sewing scissors. "Grandma, you're the only one who really sees me. Thank you for letting me breathe. I'll come back. Nico." I held the note to my chest like a second heartbeat. They had taken my love, my time, and my life. But now they couldn't take this. I had planted something in Nico's heart. Something that might just grow. Weeks passed. The days returned to silence. No music playing from Nico's phone. No threads scattered across the kitchen table. No laughter that had started to echo faintly through the house again. But I held on to that note. Folded carefully, worn at the edges, tucked into the pocket of my cardigan like a secret promise. I missed him more than I expected. But I didn't stop. Each morning I sat in that same chair by the window, sipping my tea as the sun stretched across the cracked driveway. And then I sewed. 1 apron, then 2, then a whole batch. I added colors, stitched names into the fabric, even crafted a few matching oven mitts. My little Etsy shop, May's Touch, began to grow. Not just grow, blossom. Strangers messaged me. "My grandmother passed 2 years ago. This apron reminded me of her Sunday pies." The stitching made me cry. You can feel the love in the fabric. One day I woke to 53 new orders. 53. My hands trembled as I refreshed the screen again and again, thinking it must be a glitch. But it wasn't. Someone had shared a video of my aprons on TikTok. A young woman opening her package and breaking down into tears as she read my handwritten note. "Made with love, from someone who still believes in warm kitchens and warmer hearts." It went viral. Suddenly people cared. Reporters called. I declined the interviews. Because this wasn't about fame. It wasn't even about money. It was about me not fading away. I hired a neighbor's teenage daughter to help manage the orders. She came by every afternoon after school, cheerful and eager. "You're like the cool grandma I never had," she'd say, sorting ribbons by color. I chuckled. Cool isn't a word I hear often. "You are, though," she grinned. "You built something from nothing." From nothing. Those words rang in my head. Because that's how my family had left me. With nothing. And yet I'd created joy. Not just for strangers but for myself. Then one afternoon, a white SUV pulled into my driveway. It was Tessa. My youngest. The quiet one. The one who used to curl up in my lap after nightmares and ask if I'd still be around when she turned 40. I hadn't seen her in 4 years. She stepped out slowly, sunglasses shielding her face. I opened the door before she could knock. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice almost too soft to hear. My heart pounded. "I saw you on the news," she added. "They showed your aprons. They read your note. I recognized your handwriting." I nodded, unsure of what to say. She stepped inside like she was afraid the floor would crack beneath her feet. I didn't know how to come back. After the way I left, I stayed quiet. I thought you were fine. You always seemed unbreakable. I swallowed hard. You can't break what's already been discarded. Her eyes filled with tears. I was wrong, Mom. We all were. We took and never looked back. The silence between us wasn't angry. It was heavy with truth. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said. Just to say I'm sorry.
Esther her.
Then said the words I'd wanted to hear from anyone for so long. Thank you. We sat at the table. I poured us tea. We didn't talk much more. We didn't have to. Because that night as she left, she turned back and said, I told Nico about your aprons. He wants to come visit again. If you'll have him. I nodded, smiling faintly. Always. And just like that, a small light flickered in the corner of the dark room I'd lived in for too long. I was no longer invisible. And I wasn't done yet. A week after Tessa's visit, I stood in my little kitchen humming, folding a floral apron into a box sealed with a sticker that read Made with Love by May. The air smelled like cinnamon and fabric softener. For the first time in years, peace didn't feel like a stranger. Then the phone rang. I hadn't heard my landline ring in days. Most people text or email now. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something pulled me to answer. Hello. Mom. It's me. It was Jenna. My eldest. The one who hadn't called in 8 years. The one who left after our last Thanksgiving fight, when I asked her to help with the dishes and she said, I'm not your maid, Mom, and stormed out with her husband. Hearing her voice made my hands tremble. I sat down.
Jenna.
I heard about you, she said. From Tessa. And TikTok. And well, everywhere, apparently. I stayed silent, letting her talk. I didn't realize people still cared about aprons, she said, trying to laugh. But then I saw your note in that video. And I realized. I didn't even know who you were anymore. My heart thudded. You could have known. You just never asked. She sighed. I know. I've been awful. There it was. Acknowledgement. Not enough to fix everything, but enough to open a door. I guess I thought you'd always be there. Like a coat rack. Always holding things up. Always being Mom. I was, I said softly. But even coat racks collapse if you pile on too much. Silence. I want to visit, she finally said. I want to bring the girls. They don't even remember you, and that breaks my heart. Tears filled my eyes. I'd love that. After we hung up, I sat in stunned quiet. A part of me had buried the hope that Jenna would ever return, that she'd ever care. But something had shifted. This wasn't just about aprons anymore. It was about the fact that I had become visible again. The world had taken notice. And through that spotlight, my own daughters had remembered I existed, not just as their mother, but as a woman with a life, a voice, a story. Later that evening, I walked out to the garden. The air was crisp, the sky painted orange with the last breath of the sun. I looked at the tomatoes Nico and I had planted, now ripe and glowing. I was still growing, still blooming. Suddenly, headlights flickered in my driveway. I squinted. It was a beat-up pickup truck. Dusty. Familiar. The door opened. And out stepped Raymond. My ex-husband. The man who left me 25 years ago with 2 suitcases and a note that said, I need to find myself. I hadn't heard from him since. Now here he was, older, thinner, eyes sunken and unsure. I didn't move. Just waited. He walked up the steps and cleared his throat. I saw you on the news. You're everywhere. I crossed my arms. I thought you went off to find yourself. He gave a sad smile. Turns out I lost a lot more than I found. I raised an eyebrow. Why are you here? I was wrong, he said. About everything. You weren't just the glue of this family. You were the foundation. I don't want anything. Just wanted to say. I never stopped being proud of you. I felt a storm in my chest. So many years of silence. Of raising 3 children alone. Of making miracles out of coupons and casseroles. You were always gone when it mattered, I said. And I learned how to live without you. He nodded slowly. I can see that. Then he turned to leave. But before he reached his truck, I called out. Ray. He stopped. Thank you for showing up now, even if it's late. He gave me a nod. And then he drove off into the sunset like something out of a country song. I stood there, heart pounding. My past had finally acknowledged me. But I wasn't done yet. Something bigger was coming. I could feel it. The next morning I stood at the edge of the driveway with a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching the sun rise like a promise. A gentle wind swept through the oak trees carrying memories with it. Baby laughter, teenage slammed doors, the hum of bedtime lullabies I used to sing alone. That little house, my house, had once been filled with life. And now, thanks to a few stitches and a brave post from Tessa, people cared about it again. But not just online. Yesterday I'd gotten 3 phone calls from local boutiques asking to stock my aprons. One cafe owner even asked if I could make a dozen custom ones for their servers. A reporter left a message about doing a human interest segment on me. And for the first time in decades I wasn't invisible. Still, all of that paled in comparison to what happened at 3:04 p.m. I was kneading dough for a batch of cinnamon rolls when I heard the doorbell ring. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it. There, standing in a crooked line like they weren't sure whether to run or hug me, were all 3 of my children. Jenna, the oldest, still sharp-jawed but weary-eyed. Aaron, my son, taller than I remembered, with shoulders slumped under invisible weight. And Daisy, my youngest, the firecracker who hadn't spoken to me since she married that man I never trusted. Behind them, 3 grandkids clutched juice boxes and phones, their faces uncertain. "Hi, Mom," Jenna said, holding a pot of daisies. I stared for a moment, unsure if I was dreaming. I thought I might cook for you today," Jenna added. "Like you used to do for us." "Mom," Aaron chimed in. "We know we've been distant. Selfish even. But you're all over the internet. And it took that for us to realize how much of you we took for granted." Daisy stepped forward. "And I'm sorry for how I left. You were right about him. He drained me, and I took it out on you." I looked into each of their eyes. Eyes I had once wiped tears from, kissed goodnight, prayed over when they were too sick for school. And then I did something I wasn't sure I was capable of anymore. I opened my arms, and they all stepped into them. It was awkward at first. My apron bunched between us. One of the grandkids muttered, "This is weird," which made us all laugh through tears. Later, we sat around the same kitchen table where I once cut their pancakes into hearts. Jenna sliced carrots while Daisy flipped through my old recipe binder. Aaron fixed a creaky cabinet without being asked. Felt like home again, not because they were here but because they wanted to be. After dinner, Jenna lingered behind while the others loaded into cars. "Mom," she said, setting down her mug. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." She hesitated. "Would you ever consider selling this house? And moving in with me? With us? We have the space. And the girls need their grandmother." I blinked. "You want me to live with you?" "I want you to live with us. Not because you need help but because we do. We need your strength. Your stories. Your warmth." I didn't answer right away. I needed time. Time to be sure this wasn't a performance for forgiveness, but a genuine change. Still, the fact that she asked, that alone was a salve. After she left, I stood in the kitchen, surrounded by dishes and laughter echoes, and looked at a small scrap of paper tucked under a magnet on the fridge. It was my old to-do list from 5 years ago.
Első fix pantry shelf.
2. Organize apron patterns. 3. Bake cinnamon rolls for Daisy's birthday. 4. Call Jenna again. 5. Don't cry today. I had cried that day, and many after. But tonight I didn't cry. I smiled, because I had built a life on love, and even if it took years to be seen, it was finally being valued. Still, I had one more thing to do, and it involved a surprise of my own. The next morning, I walked into town with purpose in every step, the kind that comes not from pride, but from peace. The sun was high, the streets busy. I passed the bakery where I used to buy cupcakes for Jenna's school plays. The corner drugstore where Aaron bought me cough drops when he was 10. The old movie theater Daisy once danced in front of, pretending to be a star. This town had seen my whole life. And for a long time it had watched me disappear into the background just like my family had. But now? The clerk at the boutique waved excitedly when she saw me. "Miss Virginia," she called. "We sold out of your aprons again." When can we restock? Next week, I said with a smile. The truth was, my hands couldn't sew fast enough, and I liked it that way. After stopping by the bank, I headed home to my little white house. The porch creaked the same as always, but even it seemed to sigh in relief when I stepped inside. I placed the envelope carefully on the kitchen table. The very table where I'd written checks to pay overdue bills, where I'd packed countless school lunches, where I'd once cried into birthday cake no one came home to eat. And now this table was about to witness something different. At 4 o'clock sharp, all 3 of my children walked in. I'd invited them but hadn't told them why. They looked confused but curious, even hopeful. Is everything okay? Aaron asked. I nodded. Sit down, all of you. They obeyed like they were kids again, about to get a life lesson they didn't know they needed. I pushed the envelope toward the center of the table. What's this? Daisy asked, eyeing it like it might bite. Open it, I said. Jenna peeled the flap back and pulled out the document. Her eyes widened. This is a deed? Yes. To this house. You're selling the house? Aaron asked, his voice suddenly tight. I smiled softly. No. I'm gifting it. Their eyes all snapped to me. I've rewritten my will. This house won't go to any of you, I said, calmly but firmly. They froze. It's going to the community, I continued. A foundation is being created. This house will become a resource center for single mothers, grandmothers raising children, and women starting over after hardship. For a moment, silence filled the room. You're giving it away? Jenna whispered. I nodded. I gave my life to this family. But when I needed you, I had no one. It nearly broke me. So now I want to give what I have left to the people who won't forget what it feels like to be invisible. People like I once was. But Mom, Daisy started, tears already in her eyes. I reached out and took her hand. This isn't punishment. It's purpose. Aaron looked down, shame flooding his face. I love you all, I continued. But this home, these walls deserve to keep giving. Not just collecting dust and memories of regret. Jenna blinked hard. You're stronger than we ever gave you credit for. No, sweetheart, I said, standing. I've always been this strong. You just stopped looking. A tear slid down Jenna's cheek. But then Daisy whispered, Mom, can we help? Can we be part of it? I turned to her, my voice barely steady. That's up to you. This place will need hands. Love. Laughter. Hard work. Not for me, but for the women who walked through that door hoping for a second chance. They all nodded. It wasn't instant redemption. It wasn't a tidy bow. But it was a beginning. As they left that night, they each hugged me longer than they had in years. Aaron turned at the door. Mom. Yes. I'm proud to be your son. And for the first time in a long, long while, I believed it. The next week, something changed in the air around the house. It wasn't just the chirping of birds or the breeze that rustled through the old magnolia tree. It was something warmer, richer. The feeling of life returning. For the first time in years, my front porch didn't feel like a monument to loneliness. It became a landing place for new beginnings. Boxes of books, baby clothes, and kitchen supplies began to pile up on the front steps. Donations from neighbors and strangers alike. Jenna had posted about the foundation on social media, and the response had been overwhelming. People I hadn't spoken to in decades knocked on the door with tears in their eyes and stories on their tongues. One woman clutched my hand and said, Miss Virginia, I don't know if you remember me, but when I was pregnant at 16, you gave me a ride to my doctor's appointment. You didn't even know my name, but you called me darlin' and told me I mattered. I did remember. I just never thought she would. Another mother brought her 3 children, all under the age of 5. Her voice trembled when she said, This will be the first night we've had a roof over our heads in 2 weeks. Thank you. I wasn't the only one whose eyes brimmed with tears that night. The house came alive again, not with the familiar noise of my children when they were young, but with something even more beautiful, laughter from the forgotten, joy from the broken, peace from the once pushed aside. The kitchen, once silent and cold, now smelled of home-cooked meals and echoed with conversation. Jenna came by every Saturday to help with paperwork. Daisy ran a weekly support circle for young moms. Even Aaron, who once only called on Christmas, offered to build bunk beds and paint walls. "I owe you this," he said one afternoon, holding up his paint-smeared hands. "And more." I didn't ask him to explain. I could see it in his eyes, the regret, the quiet atonement. But perhaps the most unexpected moment came on a chilly Wednesday morning. I opened the door and found a little boy holding a folded piece of paper. His mother stood behind him, eyes filled with gratitude. He handed me the note and whispered, "This is for you." I unfolded it slowly. In shaky handwriting, it read, "Thank you for making my mommy smile again. I love your house. Marcus, age 6. I pressed the note to my heart. That moment alone made every lonely year worth it. That afternoon, I stood by the window and watched as Jenna led a small gardening workshop in the front yard. The laughter of children rang out. I saw Daisy cradling a newborn. Aaron was installing shelves with 2 young fathers beside him, all of them laughing like old friends. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. I thought back to the days I sat alone in this house, praying someone would remember me. I never imagined that so many would. That the love I'd given, which once felt like it disappeared into thin air, would return like a boomerang, stronger, fuller, and multiplied. And then I heard it, soft at first but unmistakable. Laughter. My own. It escaped my lips without warning as I watched a toddler chase a butterfly through the yard. It was the purest sound I'd made in years. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had found something better than a return to the past. I had found purpose in the present, and maybe, just maybe, joy in the future. The house had transformed. No longer a quiet monument to forgotten years, it was now a beacon of hope, a sanctuary for those in need, and a testament to the strength of one woman's love. But amidst this new life, one question still echoed in my heart. Would my own children ever truly see me again? One rainy afternoon, as I was sorting through donated clothes in the living room, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened it slowly. There they stood, my children. Emma's eyes were red from crying. Jacob's hands trembled. They looked smaller somehow, as if the weight of regret had shrunk them. "Mom," Emma whispered, stepping inside. We've been wrong. We didn't understand how much you did for us, how much you gave." Jacob nodded, his voice breaking. "We were selfish. We let time and pride blind us. We missed you." I looked at their faces, their remorse, their pain, and felt something I hadn't expected. Forgiveness. "I'm not the same woman you left behind," I said softly. "I found my strength when you weren't here. And I found my purpose in those who needed me most." They reached out, tears falling freely. We embraced, not to erase the past, but to start a new chapter. That night we shared stories, laughter, and even tears. They met the children I now cared for, and saw the home I rebuilt with love and resilience. The truth was clear. Love never dies, but it can be lost until it's found again. Days turned into weeks, and slowly my family began to heal. Visits became frequent. Calls became heartfelt. The walls that once echoed with silence now rang with renewed connection. But I was no longer just a mother or grandmother. I was a woman who reclaimed her life from heartbreak. A woman who took her pain and transformed it into hope. I learned that love isn't just given or received. It's earned, nurtured, and fought for. My children learned the price of neglect and the value of presence. And I learned I could be my own hero. As I stood on my porch one evening, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of gold and pink, I smiled quietly, because I had taken back my time, my love, my life. And from the ashes, I had risen stronger than ever. This is not just my story. It's a reminder that no matter how dark the days, there is always a way to rebuild, to forgive, to love again. And sometimes the greatest victory is not in revenge, but in the quiet strength to rise and shine, even after being left with nothing. Subscribe for more heartfelt stories like this one, because sometimes healing begins with a story. Comment below if this story touched you. Share it with someone who might need to be reminded.